Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And in today's episode, avoiding cultural mistakes when visiting another country is the topic. Just like every episode, I encourage your voices because that's what makes a live broadcast interesting because you bring in voices. It becomes a very intimate, a very friendly environment to share ideas. And so let's just get to this particular topic. So imagine that you've been invited to the home of an acquaintance in a different country. And you're very worried about any missteps, about putting your foot in your mouth, about the cultural practices of that particular country. You don't want to offend the host by doing or saying anything that would create discomfort or offense. And I think one of the greatest challenges is that understanding culture requires a delicate understanding of human relations. And just doing a Google search will actually, and it can prove disastrous, because what you often find on the internet from websites and so forth, well, people tend to embellish, gloss over differences, or simply stereotype another culture without actually going to the depth of what that culture is really like. And such attitudes of finding, I would call, simplistic explanations about another culture can actually engender stereotypes by lumping people into the same individual pot. And I think what we found is that there is a lot of individuation within culture to culture. In addition, I think people from their own culture can overgeneralize the behaviors of their own people and the customs because they sometimes overlook the wide diversity that exists in a single country. For example, we simply can't say, well, people in the United States, people in Japan, people in Costa Rica, people in whatever, because there exists a wide range of diversity, and we need to be very careful of that. And let me share a story that I think illustrates this point. And I wouldn't say many years ago, in 2002, that doesn't seem so long ago, I was invited with a group of teachers from the United States to go to Nanjing, China, to give presentations on language instruction, culture, technology, and so forth. And one of the things that I had been asked is to give a presentation in a large group. These were public school teachers from elementary to junior high to high school. And I was asked to talk about culture. Well, one of the challenges about that is that right at the beginning of the presentation, I said, I'm not going to talk about America. Now, just that word of America is culturally loaded because people from Mexico are from America, from Brazil, they're Americans, Costa Ricans are Americans. But one of the things that I said to them is they wanted me to go like point by point. What do they do in schools? Well, where do you eat? What is home like? And I tried to illustrate right from the beginning that by coming up with simplistic statements, myself being one of 330 million people in the United States, what I say could actually engender more stereotyping. It's kind of like what we say echoes in 1,000, a million, a billion ears. And so instead of saying, well, in the United States, we do this and this, I said, whatever I say, which is my lived experience, you'll go back to your classrooms and you'll share that with your students and say, Randall from the United States said this, and they'll go back to their families and they'll say, well, Randall from the United States, my teacher said that Randall from the United States said this. And so what happens is that we can inadvertently share a story that is representative of our experience, but it can engender more stereotyping. And it actually, what we say, can actually cause people to fossilize their impressions of others. And I'm sure that we don't want to do that. So one of the things that I'd like to do together with you is I'd like to explain what it's like to visit my home in the United States. Yes, I'll try to talk about universal principles as well, but just keep in mind that the family that lives 2 houses down from me, well, they have different practices as well. And so they are my lived experiences. And I'm hoping that with you as the audience, as I go through these experiences, you can share a better understanding of your country, of your experiences, so that we can learn together. Before that, I just want to chime in to see who else has joined us. We have someone from Morocco. I can't read your name. I apologize. Nazreen, well, good morning. I just mentioned your presentation and encourage people to watch that. And those episodes, previous episodes, are on YouTube and Facebook. Good evening from Vietnam. Hi, Carol from Costa Rica. Welcome. Kaylor has joined from Costa Rica as well. And Nayeli. And Nayeli, I mentioned your episode coming up soon. Well, let's actually get to the actual topic for today. And again, the reason why we do live broadcasts is to bring you into the conversation so you can share your ideas and so forth. But I'm going to be focusing on family life. So if you were to come to the United States and you were going to visit me, what are some cultural tips I can share with you? And as I'm doing so, please be reflective of what people would do in your country in similar situation. And when I say in your country, I really mean in your family life, because I already mentioned that each individual, even though they're a member of a certain culture, are unique in and of themselves. So here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share some pictures along with this. And so before we begin on this topic, I've shared this picture before, and I want you to look at this picture and tell me what you see. Now, I know some of you have seen this picture before. I've shared it in a previous broadcast, but many people say, I see a tiger with bamboo trees behind it. But the question is, how many tigers do you see? And many people will say, well, I see one tiger. But look carefully at the stripes of the tiger. What we do is when we look a little closer, we see the hidden tiger. In other words, the reason why I share this is so often when we visit people from a new culture, and again, when I say new culture, there are cultures within cultures within cultures, is sometimes we don't know what to look for. And when we are blind to the culture of another person or people, we often don't see them the way they really are. So certainly what I'm going to be talking about today is keeping our eyes open, especially when we go through different experiences. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's just see if there's any other. Good morning, Omar. Great to hear from you. Rafael from Guatemala. Hi, everyone. Joseph, thank you very much for your service. Very interesting. From Argentina. And again, make sure that as you're sharing your comments today, if you say, well, in my country, we do this, or in my family, be sure to share your country so that we know. And Carol, yes, I think it's a great topic, and I'm interested in hearing your comments as well. So let's get right into this. Here we go. This is a picture of outside of my house. And let me give you a scenario. And the scenario is, as we're talking about these topics, the scenario that we find ourselves is, imagine, for example, that you are a new colleague of mine. I work at a university, you're a new colleague, and I've invited you over for dinner. So this is the outside of my house. You park outside front. So we're going to go through a series of questions. Feel free to share what you would do in your family. I'm always careful not to say in my country, because as I mentioned, there's a wide diversity. Certainly there are universals, and I'm interested, of course, in hearing those. So here we go. This is my house. Question number one. If dinner starts at 7 o'clock, I tell you that we have dinner at 7 o'clock. When do you arrive exactly? 6:45, 7 o'clock, or 7:15, and why? I want you to think about that. I'm going to give you my answer, but I want you to be thinking of your own answer from your culture. The answer in this particular case, I'm not speaking of all Americans. Oh, I'm sorry. All North Americans. Oh, I'm sorry. All of the people in the United States, because I always tell people when you say America, well, the people from Guatemala, from Mexico, they're all Americans. But if I say America in the context of today, I'm talking about the United States. So in this particular case, what time would you arrive? Dinner starts at 7. I say that dinner starts at 7, but what time do you arrive? 6:45, 7 o'clock, or 7:15? Well, in our family, you would arrive at 7 o'clock. If you arrive at 6:45, I'm still cleaning. I'm hiding, things that I should be putting away, cleaning up, vacuuming, finishing up preparations for the meal. So I would like you to arrive at 7 o'clock. 7:15, well, maybe the food is getting a little cold. I know people might arrive late because they're coming to my house for the first time. But generally, when I say 7 o'clock, I'm hoping that people will, arrive at 7 o'clock. I'm just looking at those that are arriving. Iman from Tunisia. We have Isra from the United Arab Emirates. And Carol says, I wish I could travel to your country and meet you. You are my idol since long ago. Well, one of the things that I would love, if by chance any of you are in the United States, feel free to drop by. Argentina, we are very unpunctual. So probably we would arrive at 7:30. So this is the type of engagement I'm hoping today for you to be able to share a little bit about your country. And Nayeli says 7 o'clock if possible. Juan says greetings from Peru. Thanks for sharing with us this video. Absolutely. Kaylor says, I would arrive at 6:45 because many people from the U.S. have that custom, which is great. In Costa Rica, some people would arrive at 7, others at 8. And I think sometimes that might be the case. And I would be interested in hearing why that happens as well. In Mexico, in my country, people are very unpunctual. Again, we hear that. And Nayeli says people arrive 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So yeah, times are very different. In my family, I would hope that you would arrive at 7 just because, well, we try to have dinner at a punctual time. We like to begin. That doesn't mean that we think that time is more than people, because we spend that time in getting to know you as we sit at the dinner table. And we'll talk more about that as well. All right. The next question is, if the house, so you're taking a look at my house, I'm going to blow that up a little bit. You see my front door. The next question, if the house doesn't have a doorbell, you ring on the doorbell and for some reason the doorbell is not working and so forth, how do you knock? I mean, how do you go about knocking on the door? Now, this might sound a very simple question, but there are many people that might knock in different ways. They might knock like this, all right? Or they might, but for anyone from Mexico, imagine I was having this discussion with some of the students in my class. I had students from Mexico, from Asia, from the Middle East, from Thailand, and they were kind of demonstrating to me, how they would actually knock. And one student did this. That type of knock. Now, anyone from Mexico, if you've just heard that knock, you know that that is not a typical knock. And I've had people come to my house selling things and they knock in that way. And the reality, that type of knock in some parts of Mexico is very offensive. I mean, it would just is something that you would never do, but you would never know unless you've had that experience. And Nayeli says, I laughed. Well, then it means it's very offensive. So you want to always be careful about that. Nazreem says, I'm for 7, but always about 10 minutes late about arriving. Also, I'm very punctual, but in Argentina, people generally arrive some minutes late. Jorge says, in my country, Bolivia, depends on people. They aren't very so punctual. In my case, I'm a morning person, so I might, arrive a little bit later. So this is great. Okay, Jose says, we call out the name of the person. So maybe, Jose, do you mean, epa, hola, or something like that to greet the people? Maybe the windows are open. And so you can actually, rather than knocking, you might call out the person's name. Right here, we says, in Argentina, we clap hands. So perhaps the people can hear that. Sonia says in Argentina, we reach the front door, we knock at the door as everyone else, but we clap hands. All right. So Nayeli says, I know some annoying uncles would do that on purpose. So in other words, and so kind of to annoy people. So these are great. I'm loving these comments, sharing your ideas, and that's what the whole focus of the presentation is. All right. Well, okay, you've knocked on the door and so forth. So you come in. So let's say this is my living room. So this is our living room. On the wall, you can't see it very well. Everything in this room represents who we are in different ways. The wall hanging that you see is actually written in calligraphy. It was done by a friend in Japan. It has great meaning to our family. And then if you look over on our mantle, there are pictures of our family. So imagine you walk in, we greet you into the front room. You can see that our family, there are pictures of our family there for you to get to know us. And asking questions about family is absolutely okay. Also, in our family, in our family room, we have items from around the world. And again, we welcome questions. I think people from around the world welcome questions. You're asking certain things about their family, about where they've traveled. Light conversation, I think is very common. All right. So let's go, before we go on to that, let me just go back to the living room a little bit. And the next question I have is this. Do you take a gift? So would you bring a gift to me? What would be perhaps the expectation in that particular case? Well, in my family, the one thing is, and if you're not sure, I would always encourage you to ask the host, because you don't want to bring something that, number one, they can't eat. Let's say that you bring cookies and some of the family members are gluten-free, or they have a peanut allergy or something like that, or they don't drink. I mean, if you brought a bottle of wine to our house, I wouldn't know what to do with it because my wife and I do not drink. So if you're not sure, I would encourage you to ask the host. Now, this is a question back out to you, the audience. In your particular countries or families, what kinds of gifts would you take? Would you ask the people beforehand what types of gifts would they anticipate? So in my family, I would probably say, if you want to bring anything, I would probably ask, but fruit. We love fruit. Any type of fresh fruit that we could share with the rest of the people at the dinner would be great. All right. So let's look back to some of the comments that we have here. Carol says, going back to letting the host know, your friends know that you're there. Maybe people might whistle. Tunisia, we knock at the door. I would be interested in the type of knock. Isra from United Arab Emirates says that we knock at the door 3 times. If no one answers, we have to leave. Let's see here. Nasreem says, going back to, gifts or treats or whatever, maybe taking a cake. Siviana says, we don't usually take a gift. Mona from Tunisia says, well, bring some type of fruit, and feel free to share what kinds of fruits would be typical there. Mesa from the United Arab Emirates says, maybe it's a good idea to take flowers or a box of chocolates. Great. Isra says, maybe bringing flowers, something sweet. And Carol says, maybe it would be a good idea to ask before. In my country, it's not that common to ask. Maybe we'll bring some food, some bread, some beverages, and so forth like that. So it depends on the home as well and family members. In Mexico, we would just come and have a seat. We wouldn't look around. We just we don't ask, but maybe bring fruit or a basket or something like that. A nice idea, but in Argentina, it's not very common. And Joseph says, sure, we should take something to the host. We should take us with beer and maybe a soft drink. And yeah, as I mentioned, maybe in some cases, and I would say with my particular family, you'd probably ask, because I wouldn't want you to feel embarrassed. Oh, we brought some wine and Randall doesn't drink wine. Or, oh, one of my children is gluten-free and she can't eat some of the cakes or treats that you might have. So yeah, I think people are very forgiving too. In other words, if you make a mistake, I think most people are very forgiving of that type of mistake. So let's go on. Let's go on. So the next thing is so you arrive at the house. How do you greet your host? So you arrive, my wife is there. Do you wave? Do you shake hands? Do you give a hug? Do you give a kiss? Does it depend on if it's a man and a man greeting or a woman and a woman greeting? And I know greetings are very different around the world. Some cultures, well, physical touch and contact is greatly encouraged. It's something that people do as part of human connection. That doesn't mean that in cultures where there isn't that touch, that there isn't human connection. It's just maybe manifests in different ways. So if you come to my home, let's say that you're from Mexico, and you come and you see my wife. My wife's name is Shirley. She wouldn't anticipate a hug, but she would certainly welcome that. Because we have lived around the world, we're used to different ways of interacting. So in your country, if I arrive at your home and I knock on the door, I meet your mother, your grandfather, and so forth, how do I greet them? In addition to the language, but do I shake hands? Do I, give a hug? Do I give a pat on the shoulder? Feel free to share what would be appropriate. In conjunction with this, I might ask, how do you address the people? So my wife's name is Shirley, and I know I have had students come over and say to my wife, Mrs. Shirley or Mrs. Davis. And my wife would think, well, Mrs. Davis is my mother-in-law. So usually I would encourage people to call people by their first name. But going back to your countries, if I'm, number one, visiting your home, how do I greet? Do I shake hands? Is that do men and men greet one way and women to women greet a different way? I would be interested in hearing that as well. And in relationship to this is we've talked about gift or no gift. We're talking about greeting the host. But what about shoes? So you arrive at my home. Again, it's my living room. Do you take off your shoes? Would you anticipate when someone comes to your country or to your home? Do they wear shoes? Do they wear slippers? Do you wait to see what the host says and so forth? So let's actually take a look at some of the comments that have come up. Let's see what we have. In Argentina, we kiss and hug everyone. So men and women hug everyone. And I would be interesting to know, and we can't demonstrate it here. Is it like kiss on one cheek, kiss? What does that look like? Carol says it depends on the person, also on the relationship. We normally shake hands. So often, depending on the relationship is important. Shake hands, send and give a kiss. It depends on the person, whether they are close or not. Very, very good. Also, Siviana, we hug and kiss a lot. Again, I might forget what country you're from, and so feel free to add that to your note. So a lot of kissing and hugging, but I see it depends on the relationship. In Uruguay, we greet with kisses, but I had a bad moment greeting someone to that way in Puerto Rico. It really was awkward. So again, just because you're from a Spanish-speaking country, it can be awkward, and it can be very awkward with people within your own neighborhood. As I just mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, you might come to my house and maybe shake my hands or give me a hug. But if you try that, 3 houses down the street, they might have a completely different practice. Nazreen says, men to men shake hands, women to women, a slight wave. Thank you for sharing that. Nesreen says, no shoes. And I'm assuming, Nesreen, this is in your home here in the United States. Carol says, in Costa Rica, we hug, we shake hands. These are great ideas. Costa Rica, we don't take off our shoes. Well, nowadays, because of COVID, we do it. Great ideas. Here is Jorge. Well, every country has its manner for greetings. In the U.S., people shake hands, men, women may give a kiss. And again, thinking about the practices from house to house and so forth. Mona says, I would ask my host how she wants me to call her. So not sure. I know that sometimes my own students have avoided saying anything to my wife. So I think this is a great point, Mona. And this is the type of questions I'm encouraging today. When you're not sure, ask. And I think that's a great way of asking. Joseph says, in Vietnam, we shake hands. And if we have a good relationship, we hug. And Nayeli says, in Mexico, in that situation, we all shake hands. It's acceptable to kiss on one cheek, only women to women. Well, great questions. And again, these are all great questions, and it's always difficult to address every single question, but I'm grateful that you're trying to do so. Well, let's go on to actual dinner etiquette. So you've seen my living room. Let's go into my house just a little bit more. So you're passing in the living room. If you came to my house, we might spend a few minutes here, but usually because you're close friends, you'll actually come into, we've shared those pictures, into our family room. So we walk past the living room, we go through the kitchen, and this is kind of our family room where we have couches. This is where we have most of our gatherings with family, with friends. We like the place because it has a lot of windows and lighting. Also in this room, we have things that represent us. My wife enjoys music. She's practicing the organ. Who knows? She might play the organ for you if you were interested. But also you see in the picture things that represent our family. They are toys for our grandson. That's just what they are. And we also have a playroom in the basement of our house where if you bring children, you're welcome to do so and to play with them there. So this is our kitchen. We're going to be talking now a little bit about dining etiquette. This is where we usually prepare meals. And you see the counter right here. So a lot of times we know when we have new guests, we don't really know what they can eat, what food restrictions, what allergies they might have, what religious observances. So often in our family, we might have food placed out on our counter so that you can select what you want to eat in that particular case. With this in mind, what I want to do is I want to ask the following. So that's a little bit of our kitchen. Let me share with you one more picture of this area so you can have an idea. And on our kitchen wall, we have pictures. If you see the pictures behind me, these represent our family. So our home has pictures of family, animals, horses, and so forth. So those are a little bit about our family. But let's talk about that dinner etiquette. My question to you is, in your family or in your country, are there any special words that people say before they start a meal? So you're in our home, we have the food, out on the counter, you select what you want. Before we begin, I know a lot of people might not be sure, well, are there any special words? Is there a prayer given? And so forth. In our home, a prayer is generally given over the food. You're welcome to, listen quietly to that. We're not asking you to actually pray with us, but we might offer a prayer. Also, in some countries, there might be just some special words of thanksgiving. I know that in Japan, they might say something like itadakimasu, which is let's eat. We're grateful for the food. So those are certain words. And I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Let's see some other comments going back to some of the earlier. We generally take off our shoes. We shake hands. We take off our shoes before entering the house. We saw that. Emily actually is my daughter. She's joining in the conversation today. So Emily, feel free. She says, show the picture. I think I need to post that picture so that people can see that. Mona says, would you show us guest your house and make a tour of it? So generally what we would do is, I think, and Emily, feel free, again, Emily's my daughter, feel free to share any of your thoughts on that, because I think people are interested, not just my perspective, but yours as well. So would I show you? I think this is a great question, because you want to know expectations. So in our home, probably what we would do is we would show you the living room. I've showed you that. We would show you the kitchen. We would show you our family room that is over here. We would show you outside. We would show you downstairs, which is the playroom. We generally wouldn't show you the bedrooms, just because, well, perhaps they're not as, as tidy as everything else, but we would show you certainly the main rooms of the house. We would show you the bathroom and so forth. So I think that's a great question to ask, because, people want to know. We would show you outside. We would show you your garden. Carol says, our kitchen is very similar in Costa Rica. Carol said, in my country, most people would pray, offer some type of prayer before a meal. And I think that's important to be aware of. Generally, you must thank God every piece of food that you eat. So thanking, expressing God, I think is a practice that some people do. Each person says Bismillah before they eat, but not a formal prayer. So perhaps, Nazreen, you can indicate Bismillah for the audience and what that means. And you're saying that every person says that. And that's probably a statement of thanksgiving. In Uruguay, we just said buen provecho, which means to your health. And I think these are the types of conversations I'm happy to hear from all of you. Riyadh from Tunisia, before we eat, we say, in the name of God. So some reference to thankfulness of God and so forth. And Carol says, bon appetit, to enjoy your meal. Emily says, Mona, when I have guests, I show guests my house except my bedrooms. So again, Mona, Emily is my daughter. She has her own house. And so, yeah, showing people around. I think people are interested. And I think with international visitors, they want to know a little bit about the place. And they want to feel comfortable in your home, of where they can go and not go, and just understand a little bit about the culture too. Riyadh says, we have a guest for the first time. We show them around the house. I think that's probably pretty common. Mona says, we say Bismillah, which when at the start, and then at the dinner we say, and then again, you're going to have to help me pronunciation. And please let us know what that means at the start and at the end. And I think Riyadh also mentioned that, in the name of God, perhaps similar, maybe different. In Argentina, generally we say, generally we say anything. It would be a good habit. Nisreen says, in the name of God. Senda says, we say the word Bismillah. And again, I can't pronounce all of these words, but it looks like names reference to God, showing great thanksgiving, I think is important. And Mona, just so you know, Mona, it looks like, Emily, you have a new friend from Tunisia. Great. And thank you, Emily, for joining in. Joseph says, it's a little weird in our country. Instead of saying enjoy your meal, we say something like eat your food. I don't know how to translate that, and I'm not sure how to translate that either. So I think all of these means in the name of Allah. I think all of these examples are, okay, when people come to a home, some words are given before the prayer. It might be useful to let the people that are coming, let them know beforehand. Generally, we might say these words as part of the beginning the meal and ending the meal. This is what we usually do, so that your guest feels very comfortable and they understand that. We say bless the food when we're about to eat. Great. I think that all of us need to thank the magnificent cook. Absolutely. I think it's going to be my wife cooking, and thanking her for the meal, I think, is a great idea as well. over here. We thank God for giving us the food and asking a blessing. So these are the types of, I think, language that people want to become familiar with so they know what to expect. Well, great. The next thing is I want to talk about in relation to this is what special dinner etiquette is there that should be observed during the meal? And I know I get so nervous. For example, how are utensils used? Do you use a fork and a knife? Do you use chopsticks? Do you use your fingers? Do you leave food on the plate after you're finished? What if you're a little bit hungry and you want more food? What do you say? What if you don't like something? So, number one, I want you to think about any special etiquette that you would anticipate and so forth. But one of the things I want to share is imagine that you come to my home. And again, I have food on the counter. Our family will provide a variety of things. And probably before you come, we'll ask you if you have any dietary restrictions, allergy, any religious observances or culture that we should be aware of. But if during the meal you take a bite of something and you realize, oh, this is not suiting me at all, then I would certainly ask. I would never want anyone to continue to eat something that for whatever reason feels uncomfortable, or it's just, oh, this has a liver in it, or something that, oh, I don't know if I can eat this. I would much rather people say, Randy and Shirley, thank you. This is just this. Yeah, I can't really eat this. Or for example, I would prefer someone to let me know that for whatever reason, I don't like this, or it's not going down well, or it doesn't suit me, or whatever language that you want to use. All right. Something that I'm not used to. I would much prefer people to indicate to me that it's something that I wasn't anticipating. The flavor is something different, that to let me know. And then certainly we could provide something else. There would be other options to choose from as well. Let's look at some other comments that have come up. Here we go. Carol, can people in your country speak at the table? That's what we're going to get to next, because I think this is a really important comment, because right at the beginning, I mentioned that when you arrive, we're anticipating to kind of begin the meal. And one of the things that we're anticipating is during the dinner, that's where we have lots of conversation. So we're going to come back to that in a minute, Carol. Nazreen says, depends on the type of food. Some food is eaten with your hands, others with a spoon. If you don't like the food, you should say it. Try to eat something else on the table, because there's usually something else to be eaten. And I think most people are very gracious, realizing that there will be foods that maybe you're not accustomed to or used to. Great things. Mesa from the United Arab Emirates says, guests are asked to behave as if they were at their own home, and this gives them some freedom to be spontaneous and to eat as much as they want in any way they prefer. I think that's a very gracious way of doing that. Mauro says, in some countries, make noises with food is a compliment. And I wish I had some students from Japan or visitors from Japan, because I think that's very common to eat like ramen noodles. And as you're eating in Japan, you're slurping the food, because that can be indicative of how good the food really is. All right. Going over, Joseph said, we use chopsticks with all kinds of food. Ria says we should not express our disapproval or dislike of certain foods. And so that might be being aware of what to say, what not to say, certainly could be a delicate topic indeed. The next topic, what I'd like to talk about. So I think Carol was talking, and I think, Carol, your comment was to everyone, is not just to me, but to everyone, is what kinds of things do you talk about at the dinner table? And at our table, we really enjoy conversation. We like open conversation on a variety of topics, done with respect. We try to ask questions and listen with understanding and so forth. There's certain topics that I probably wouldn't talk a lot about, like politics. For example, it's the upcoming election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. If you were to ask me who I wanted to vote for, I would probably deflect the topic of conversation. And I would probably say, well, people need to consider all of the issues. So certainly there are certain topics, talking about religious observances, I'm open to that. About family, I'm open to that. So certainly I would encourage people, if you're asking questions, watch carefully to the demeanor of your host so that you can get a sense of what is appropriate and not. The next question I have maybe is related, and we've covered these already, is are there any absolute no-nos that you should never do at the dinner table? So for example, one example might be is in Japan with chopsticks, you're not going to lick your chopsticks. You're not going to, jab your rice or any of the meat with chopsticks. Those are considered poor behavior, poor manners. And I would consider those no-nos. But once again, if you come to my home and you start eating rice with your fingers, my wife and I are just assuming that maybe that's part of your own cultural tradition. I would have not a problem in that at all, because hopefully I would understand that you're in the learning process. You're trying to, as maybe Mesa said maybe making you feel comfortable in our home. Certainly that would be fine as well. The other question is regarding dinner. Is there any special beverage that is served at our dinner table? Well, I'm sure if Emily came and asked, usually we have water, and often milk. We don't, generally, if we might have some juice or some other type of beverage in that way. So those are the types of things that we might serve. But what about in your countries? What kind of beverages might be served as well? In a minute, we're going to go on to after dinner activities. We're closing out our episode for today, but let's see what other comments that we have in before we go on. We have eat noodles is a challenge without making noise, and I agree. And just as mentioned earlier, sometimes, and in Japan especially, if you go to a noodle shop, well, slurping your noodles, it can be a sign of pleasure that you really enjoy those foods. Nayeli says, in Mexico, in my family, we ask if there's anything they would or wouldn't like to eat. Finishing everything on the plate or asking for more is a compliment. So certainly what I would do in a similar way, I would ask you before you came, some of the things that you like. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't like liver. And my wife will tell you in the 33 years that we've been married, boy, liver is something that I just don't enjoy. So I would certainly ask people beforehand what you would like and not like. Nazreen says, lots of talking and laughter at the table. Absolutely. We talk about all kinds of things at the dinner table. There is really no restricted topic per se. Sometimes our kids go off in tangents and talk about everything. And we might say, no, I'm not really comfortable with that topic. But yeah, lots of laughing, lots of talking, I think is important. Omar says, thanks for this conversation. I enjoyed watching. That's great. And that's the part, the really important part I like about these live episodes is that people can share their comments throughout. Carol says, once I visited a friend in her house, it was not allowed to speak at the table. She told us before. It was very weird because in my country, we do speak at the table. We are very talkative. Carol, so you're talking, I'm assuming, about someone maybe from a different country, perhaps. But yes, that I find that really different. And I would expect that you're talking during the meal, you're asking questions, we're laughing, we're sharing, we're drinking. I think that's important. Emily says, again, my daughter Emily says milk and water. I think she's referring to our home, but also her own home as well. But I probably would have other things. I probably would have juice or something like that in case you preferred something else. Carol says, we often have soda and tea. What kind of tea do you have? That would be interesting to know as well. And Nazreen says, we serve juice and water because that's what we like. I think that's important to serve what you like. Then we invite guests and we usually put out sodas as well. I wouldn't embarrass my guests. And I think Mona's bringing in these questions of, being careful, being cautious, even if a student or a guest makes a mistake. Yeah. How do you let people know that maybe something is not appropriate? Because I think people really want to know. They don't want to know 3 weeks later, when you were over at my house, you made a mistake or you did something that is generally not culturally appropriate. But yes, using sensitivity is absolutely important. Mesa says, it's not nice to eat from the dish that is close to you. You can ask someone to pass it instead of stretching out your arm. I think that is really important as well. Well, let me go ahead and finish out today with actually, let me go back with the, we've seen these particular comments. And these are great. And that was Mesa's comment so far. So let's go ahead. What I'd like to do is wrap up today's episode with talking a little bit about after dinner activities. So you've arrived at my home. You've probably taken off your shoes. If you lie, you can keep your shoes on. That's not a problem. We talked a little bit about family. We've come down, we've sat at the table, we've had conversation, we've had a great meal. What do we do after dinner? Well, in our family, if you come over, probably we're going to prepare some type of games. We like, sometimes we play board games. We might do Pictionary. We might have, some other things that, not a game that's going to last 3 hours, but maybe some game or activity that we can kind of mingle a little bit more, get to know each other, kind of have a lot of laughter and fun. We would want to make sure that you feel very comfortable in a home. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we would anticipate in our home. Let's see what else we have here. Also here, Nayeli says we have fruit and water. Most families in Mexico would also have soda. Here's after dinner, maybe a good movie. Yeah, maybe depending on the amount of time that is, still left in the visit. So the last thing is, so imagine that we get together, we have these, great dinner, great conversation, talking about family. And then after dinner, we'll probably maybe play a game, maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. The question is, and this would be the last question, how do you know when it's time to leave? And before I forget that, let me go back for a minute because there is a question I forgot to ask. We finished the meal, should you ask to help clean up in the kitchen? Well, one of the things that my wife would probably say, no, don't worry about it. But if you're volunteering and you want to help, like put the dishes in the dishwasher, cleaning up a little bit, I'm happy to allow you to do that. Not required at all. And I don't know what it would be like in your particular family or country. Would you expect someone to help? Would you feel bad if I went into the kitchen and kind of helped with dishes? Because that's my nature. If you've provided dinner for me, I have no problem at all going into your kitchen if you allow it to clean some of your dishes. Not a problem at all. Let's look at some last few comments before we talk about wrapping it up. Carol is going back to what is served as some beverages, cold green tea, lemon tea, apricot, and so forth. Isra from the United Arab Emirates said we watch movies, share ideas about the news. Nayeli says after dinner, we go to the living room and just talk, have some coffee, kind of light conversation. And Mesa says after dinner, guests are invited to drink a cup of tea. They might be invited for some video games, maybe indoor activities, depending on their age. And Mona says, if after dinner you invite me for a game, I would probably leave by midnight instead of 10 p.m. Well, that's interesting because I think, and I would be interested in hearing, this is a question I haven't even asked. What time in your country, if you have dinner, what time would that start? And when would guests anticipate going home? So in my family, you could say we go to bed relatively early, but if we invite you over for dinner, let's say at 7 o'clock, it might be even a little bit earlier. We have dinner, we play a game and so forth. So probably around, I would say 9:30 or so, we would be wrapping things up and then closing out the evening. And I think for me, it's always nice to have a great evening, ending a little bit earlier with the idea of maybe resuming another date, having another party together, having another dinner would certainly be the ideas as well. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, Carol's laughing out loud, I think, regarding my comment. Nazreem says, it's nice to help and allow the women to get to know each other, but it isn't required, especially if it's your first time. So you're talking, Nazreem, about the women. What about the men? Would they be expected or encouraged or invited or allowed to enter the kitchen to assist? Or would they perhaps just relax out in the family room and so forth? Yeah, there's certainly those differences. Another idea, Reem says, in my country, we put a very generous quantity and everyone is free to get as much as they like. I think that's talking about the portions of food. There are some people who use forks and knives, others who don't. For example, I'm a very modern woman, but I never eat fish with a fork and spoon. For beverages, we only use soft refreshments. Nayeli says, in this broadcast, I really feel like going for dinner to your place. You're always welcome to dinner at my place. Anyone is. Nazreem says the men stay out of the kitchen. And yeah, I think I need to honor that. Just because I might want to assist, it's something that, in many places, you have to establish boundaries of culture. And I think that's important to honor and respect that as well. All right. Well, I just want to thank all of you. I think we've had a lot of interesting conversation about visiting homes, dinner etiquette, taking shoes on, taking shoes off, types of gifts. And I hope this episode is giving you things to think about, maybe things that you can talk with your teachers, with other teachers, with students, to help you develop better connections with one another so that we can learn more about our world neighbors. Feel free, after the episode is finished, to share your other ideas, any additional comments you might have on this episode, anything that we didn't cover in the episode that you think would be very relevant. And again, if by chance your life finds you in this part of the woods or in the United States, I invite anyone to come by and visit, come by for dinner, because I think life is about human connections. Mona says, what would you think if you asked a guest for more food? Oh, absolutely. And that was a great comment there to end. And again, this is the idea of, again, what if a guest asks for more food? Certainly, I would say, please, yes. And I probably would, right before the dinner, let the guests know, if you really enjoy the food, I can't eat all this. I don't want to keep the leftovers. So feel free to eat as much as you like. And I think that's important as well. So again, thank you very much for joining this episode. I think the ideas that we've covered and with your voices have made this episode a very interesting one. Sharing ideas, sharing cultures, I think was what life is all about. Look, I look forward to meeting you in other episodes. If by chance you're interested in joining a future episode as a guest, please feel free to let me know. And on Facebook, you'll see additional references to upcoming episodes. The episodes are always posted on Facebook and on my YouTube channel. So thanks again for joining. And until